Where to begin? Well, let's get this out the way. Most of you, and by you, I mean black, white, and everything in between. Most of you don't know what the problem is, and therefore, no matter how well-intended you may be, you are not going to address, let alone help with the root cause. Now, some may say, Imam, is this really such a time we should be having this conversation when people are in the streets and such? Yes. This is a time to strike a lethal blow to the idolatry of race-based thinking. Let me repeat that again. This is an opportunity to strike a lethal blow to the idolatry of race-based thinking. The challenge we need to put forth is one that goes to the heart of the matter. And many of you are very well intended, but you are off the mark. I know that this one is going to be a little bit heavy-handed, and I'm just going to put it out there and you make of it what you will. So let me at least get my thoughts out of my head and take you on a little journey. So you need to sit down, maybe even get out a pencil and some paper, take some notes, because this one's going to be a little bit. Everybody wants to deal with the problem of racism. This is admirable. Muslims included want to deal with the problem of racism. Now, some of the critics of the kind of Johnny-come-latelyism of Muslims who suddenly seem to care about the plight of black people, even though we've been dying for quite a while due to a number of different causes, some of them self-inflicted. Yes, you can read into that the black-on-black crime slogan. And of course, some of this, like we've seen with the unfortunate case of George Floyd and so many other George Floyds where the perpetrator was not black. But I want to put this out there to consider. We see this as a moment to change history. It may indeed change history. The question, will black people change? We all know that the Quran says, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah will never change the condition of a people. Or perhaps Allah does not, because it's mudari', la yughayyiru. Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. And when Allah uses the word inna, this is something we can rely upon in the way that we rely upon rain being wet and fire being hot, but even more so. This is a truth that is not axiomatic on anything else. Allah's truths are not truthful. They are not true because people believe in them. They are true because He said them. Whether people believe in them or not is only a matter of which people wish to avail themselves of the truth. And I say this because this is not the first time history has changed, if such a statement even makes any sense. If we roll back our clock to the 1960s, and of course the decades before that, black people dying, black people being tortured by their government, their leaders being assassinated. And it came to something of a head with the assassination of Martin Luther King. Of course, many will say, well, it was a white supremacist that killed him. I should let you talk to my friend Shakir. He may point you in a different direction on that one. But let's go with the common understanding of that. Martin was killed. Civil rights laws are enacted. And black people, so-called black people, are given numerous rights. And yet, our condition, by many metrics, not only did it improve, it actually went down. And as many people have correctly observed, it seems that every other group has benefited from the change that came about on the backs of so-called black folks. Everybody else seemed to benefit from it, except us, except black folks. So society changed, laws changed, but our hearts and our souls as black people did not change. Why is that? Now, we could try to explain it through some sort of neo-eugenics theory of inferiority, but no. It is, in my understanding, due to the fact that we have labored under an ideology and a framework, one that is perhaps so grand and so invisible, we don't even know that it is there. And that framework, sometimes we call white supremacy. And I'm going to put that word aside for a minute because it's such an emotionally charged word, and it's been bandied about and transacted so much. It's like a $20 bill. You don't really want to handle it without washing your hands. I'm going to say race-based thinking. So what happened to us black people, us African Americans, us colored people, us Negroes? What happened to us in our experience of coming to the New World, of coming to the West? Well, let's look at that perhaps through another lens. The so-called black person, African American, Negro, colored person, from the time that he or she was brought here, has been so completely circumscribed and labeled by others that we have never really had the opportunity to know who we are, not only on our own terms, but also on mutual terms with other peoples, because we are no longer a people. The process of slavery, the process of the transatlantic slave trade, the process of Jim Crow, the process of white supremacy, and the process of race-based thinking has stripped from us part of our divine primordial template. The Quran says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you men and women, and then we made you, right? So that's a conversation for another day. There is only man and woman. There is only male and female. ذَكَرْ وَالْأُنْثَى. And likewise, we were made into a sha'ab or a qabila, the plural being shu'ub and qaba'il. What is the meaning of sha'ab and qabila? For the sake of this little conversation, let's say peoples and tribes. Nations and tribes is maybe a little bit grandiose. Peoples and tribes. And we have been made into peoples and tribes by the Creator. Mark this down. We have been made into these two groups, right? This passage defines who we are on an elemental level. We are either man or woman. I'm sorry. There's only two genders, and you don't get to make them up. We are made into peoples, sha'ab and qabila. لِتَعَارَفُوا. For the purpose of mutual recognition. Meaning that different peoples should come to know one another on the mutual level playing field of being Bani Adam, of being the sons and daughters of Adam, alayhi salam, the first man. This is very important. One of the major psychological deficiencies that we are operating under as so-called black people is the notion that we are deficient or lower than others, particularly whites. This is one of the major psychological, traumatic byproducts of race-based thinking. And the easy way to demonstrate this is when we use terms like minorities. Who does this imply? Because deep in the psychology of this word, minority, is not a numerical understanding of a population. That's what it would like us to believe. But it is also a label that reduces those people from whiteness. And of course, what's implied in the term minorities are everybody other than whites. So what we have here is a debasing of non-whites and in the Western context, particularly black people, but not exclusively, but particularly black people. And the quasi-transcendence of whiteness, where whiteness is no longer seen as part of a group, but is above humanity. In fact, we'll even get to that word in a minute. The divine template, as articulated in Islam and as revealed in the Holy Quran, is one of every descendant of Adam, لِتَعَارَفُوا, being on a level playing field. Now, I don't mean on a level playing field in terms of money and economics. I'm talking about something far more elemental on base value. And until we so-called black people return to being a people and not citizens, we will never achieve this. And we will always be subconsciously, completely dominated, labeled, and circumscribed by whiteness. And whiteness will continue to artificially walk on water and float up in the clouds as if they are angelic beings. This serves no good purpose to white people or black people. We are to be mutual ibad Allah, mutual slaves of Allah, mutual creations of Allah that know each other on a mutual platform. And of course, Western secular democratic societies have done everything within their power to make religion docile and obsolete. So what we have in the context of America, and I'm going to say even the West in general, Europe, but in America, we can see how this has created a problem for us. I'm saying all of this because I'm trying to unpack an enormous, just imagine this is the Eid gift I wanted to get for all of you guys. But it's so huge, right? It's going to take me a minute to unpack it. One of the peculiar things about Western secular democracies, and one of the tragedies of Western secular democracies, has been the abolition of tradition. Because along with being a sha'ab or a qabila, along with being some kind of a people or a tribe, see, in a tribe, a person comes of age not purely by the passing of time, but is guided and scrutinized by those who are your elder. One comes of age in a tribe or in a traditional context, perhaps going through certain rituals, being recognized by people who are already there, and therefore you don't just simply become a man, and you do not simply become a woman just simply because you turn 16 or 18 or 21, like what we have in the secular system. But you have to be beholden to something other than yourself. And tragically, we no longer have coming of age rituals. We don't have them for white people. We don't have them for black people. Only in certain minorities, only in certain ethnicities do we still have such hocus pocus rituals of coming of age. And therefore, the state takes on the horrible and artificial role as tribal elder, except the state doesn't exact any demands from you other than taxes. So for one to become a man in the secular nation state, just simply let time pass, and voila, you are a man, and voila, you are a woman. You turn 18, even though you can be completely irresponsible and you haven't had to achieve anything and there's no standard set up. And it is precisely from this and some other things that the culture of mediocrity has arisen within black culture. So for all of the things that white supremacy does, and it does things and does many evil things and has and still does, we ourselves, though, continue to try to operate and seek dignity and seek nobility in a system that is designed to dispossess us of this. We are a people that don't have that nobility because, as the Quran says, وَلَقَدْ قَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. God himself, Allah himself has said, and we have ennobled Bani Adam. Who is Bani Adam? وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We have made you into peoples so you may be on the same level and know one another, not to lord over one another, nor to be abased. Right? The important conversation about race-based thinking is just not about how evil white people are. Right? Certainly white supremacy is an evil thing. But it's actually quite idolatrous. This is a kind of shirk. And it's not befitting, it is neither befitting for white people to lord over black people, nor is it befitting for black people to be downtrodden. No, we should be on the same level playing field. لِتَعَارَفُوا. We must take this moment to strike a blow, perhaps a lethal blow. If we really want to sound the horn for revolution, it should be the revolution of La ilaha illallah, to strike a blow into the heart of shirk, into idolatry, into the idolatry of race-based thinking. Now, I want to make one thing clear, and I wrote about this earlier on Facebook and on my Instagram page. I am not opposed to blackness. I identify as black. I love my culture, my food, my music, my I love my culture. But I do advocate for moving away from blackness as a race, because it's ultimately a false framework created by other created beings, and moving into the divinely created framework of being a sha'ab or a qabila. We can get into a conversation about which one of those we'll be in. I advocate for moving into a tribal-based blackness and no longer a race-based blackness. If for no other reason, that race, and as we often hear, race is a socially constructed theory. Many things are socially constructed. The problem is not that it's socially constructed. The problem is that it is constructed by other created beings and then is subconsciously interpreted as a natural framework, like a man or a woman. Black people need to move back into the house of God. Black people need to move back truthfully into Tawheed. White people also need to move back into the house of God and abandon وَلَا تَقُولُوا ثَلَاثَةً. Right? Don't say that Allah is three. Do not say that Isa ibn Maryam. Don't say that Jesus is the Son of God. This is an abomination. Islam truthfully is a solution because it will not tolerate false idols or ideologies that are in essence false idols. It will not tolerate them. Which brings me to another marker. It appears that the Muslim community has awoken from its slumber and suddenly cares about the plight of black people. Some find this to be a little too good to believe. Some are saying, where have you been all these years? And some of those are definitely worthwhile critiques. My biggest concern, though, is how our community, black or non-black Muslims, continue to take their cues from the dominant culture, which wants to perpetuate, guess what? Race-based thinking. In order to move away from this, we need to re-engage the Quran and the parables that are in there, not as poetry, not as stories, but rather of templates and lenses of how to view the world and deal with it and solve problems. How to be. So when we look to the Quran, and I've seen many Muslims now saying, our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad was an activist. And what he did was activism. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, was not an activist. He was the messenger of Allah. He was a messenger and he delivered a message. What is that message? La ilaha illallah. There is nothing to worship but Allah. Muhammadun abduhu wa rasuluhu. That Muhammad is his final slave and messenger sent to mankind. And amongst many other things, he is also Nabi, to give news. News of what? Yawmul Qiyamah. To give news that there is a final hour and a final reckoning. What we do in this life matters. And therefore, this is in essence what all of the Rasul and Anbiya, all of the messengers and all of the prophets were. They brought people, in essence, this. And I say this because we want to say the Prophet was a activist. And therefore, the story of Moses and Pharaoh, of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. Moses was an activist, and he freed his people. No. Moses was a messenger. He was given the Torah. He was given a book. And he warned the people about the Day of Judgment. Now, as it relates to Fir'aun, what does Allah say about Fir'aun? Pharaoh. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Moses, go to Pharaoh because he has transgressed and gone beyond all bounds. What was that transgression? The enslavement of the Jews in Egypt. يذبحون أبناءكم ويستحيون نساءكم. Slaughtering the male children and psychological terrorism of letting the women live and witness this. Sound familiar? How did Allah deal with a tyrant and a system of tyranny? He didn't send Moses to the Jews as an activist. Indeed, Allah did save the Jews. He sent Moses to Pharaoh. He sent Moses to deal with the head of the snake. If we, in our wanting to deal with tyranny, And white supremacy is a tyranny. And what we saw with George Floyd is tyranny and brutality. We cannot simply just deal with small fries and small fish. We have to go to the head of the fish, or the head of the snake rather. We have to go to the head of the snake and deal with that directly, because that is the Quranic framework and imperative. Now, Moses, alayhi salam, was kind of scared. He had what we might even call imposter syndrome. He didn't feel like he was really up to the task to go and deal with Pharaoh. So Allah sent his brother Aaron with him, Harun alayhi salam. And together, Musa and Harun, Moses and Aaron, they confronted Pharaoh, and they supported each other in doing so. If the Muslim community in America wants to deal with the problem that is facing white people and black people, if we want to help black people, and we also have to help white people too stop being tyrannical, then we will have to be like Moses and Moses and Aaron in dealing with Pharaoh. We will not be able to do it alone. So this dichotomy of black and non-black Arab, we must work cooperatively together, pool our resources, and support one another. But we also have to focus on the big picture. While indeed Musa alayhi salam parted the sea by Allah's permission, Allah is very emphatic. We drowned Pharaoh, and we drowned his army in the ocean. It's not you that makes the staff do what it does, Moses. It's us. But you play your part. And therefore, one of the most admirable qualities of Musa alayhi salam is his courage in an overwhelming and fearful situation. He undoubtedly had to master his fear and obey Allah and take the message of La ilaha illallah and the message of stop committing dhulm, of oppression in the land. He took it straight to the horse's mouth. If we allow ourselves to stand with the people versus standing for the people, we will undoubtedly be drowned in a sea of confusion and of conflicting ideologies. Moses saved his people, but he was not with them like an activist. His job and his position was too important for that. Yes, our feelings are with the people, but we need to speak to the issues on a 40,000 foot level that will truthfully bring relief. Because as we've seen in the past, society can change, but our condition as black people will not change if we don't change internally. This is just an uncomfortable truth that the activist Muslim doesn't want to deal with. We can have feelings, we can have anger, we can have outrage, and actually we should, because what we've seen is, this is insanity. But also we have to have the same outrage about what we do to each other too. We have to have the same outrage how we feel about what we do to ourselves and what we've done to ourselves for decades. It's inexcusable. And if once again we don't change the conditions in our heart, the world itself, it indeed will change. But we will stay exactly where we are. This is the opportunity to strike a blow against the idolatry of race-based thinking, and to encourage black people to see themselves as a creation, a unique creation of Allah. And also to encourage white people to come out of the clouds and to join the rest of Bani Adam. so that we can mutually know one another. You know, we have these terms that we use now. People of color. People of color. Once again, the term people of color seems to apply to everybody except white people, as if they also don't have a hue. We must smash these false idols of race-based thinking. White people have a hue, and it is a sign from Allah. Just as much as black people, Asian people, and every other group of people on this planet. Every abd of Allah, every creation of Allah, every tribe and people that Allah has ever created that have ever lived and walked this earth have had a hue. And we must come to know each other, and that might not be easy. This is the part we have to also acknowledge. When Allah says, لِتَعَارَفُوا, it's not saying it will be easy. This is not, reading Rainbow. It will undoubtedly sometimes be difficult, and we'll have conflict because we are a creation inherently filled with conflict. But this is the command of Allah, and the command of Allah demands us to supersede sometimes our base nature. So standing with the people and standing for the people are two different things. I stand for the people. I stand for every person unjustly murdered. And unjustly murdered are not only black folks. One of the most sinister tricks that has come out of this system in this America, in this Western secular democracy, is that it has convinced black people, it has convinced us that the suffering that we have endured over the last couple hundred years is somehow unique. That other peoples throughout history have not been crushed and destroyed and wiped out and suffered humiliating loss. We have been told, particularly by systems of liberal thought, we are unique in this matter, and therefore we have no agency. Such little agency do we possess that we cannot even call upon Allah to change our condition. This is idolatry. This is idolatry on the highest order, and this is shaitanic. Shaitan, as the Quran says, what? He only wants to make us despair. And I'm sorry. As the Prophet ﷺ said, on every path is a devil. At the end of that path, there's a shaitan calling to it. And I'm no fan of conservatism. There's a shaitan standing also on the path of American conservatism as well. Don't get anything twisted about what's being said here. Or don't come to any swift conclusions about who I am and how I think. But there is undoubtedly a shaitan standing at the gateway of liberalism and calling to it. And it wants us to despair. We can indeed be liberated, but we must change the condition of our hearts. We must be elevated to the level of being sha'ab. And we must pull our white brothers and sisters down out of the clouds to being sha'ab, and then we can mutually look each other in the eye and can come to know one another. And this should be the flag that we plant in the sand, that we are willing to fight and bleed and die for. I'm 100% serious. I hope we can have a conversation. You know, I find it very frustrating sometimes, to be quite honest, especially with my own community, with the black community, with the black Muslim community, and just with black folks, period, that when we want to have conversations that suddenly want to shake up the snow globe a little bit, we become very, I'm not going to listen to that. In the same way that the pagan Arabs, when the Prophet ﷺ went and preached to them, like, what are you worshiping this idol for? You know it can't benefit you. It can't harm you. It can't even do anything for itself. Why are you worshiping it? Well, وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. We found our forefathers doing it. Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change themselves. And we must abandon, even for ourselves, we must ensure that ourselves are abandoning the idolatry of race-based thinking and move into framework, the Quranic, the divine framework of what? Being peoples, of having traditions, of having dignity. This is what we have to fight for. And I'm personally really not interested in much else. So I hope we can have a conversation. This is just the beginning. Trust me, I've tried to make this fairly short. This is about 40, 45 minutes. And don't shoot the messenger. Let's talk about it. If you have questions and don't quite completely understand what I said, ask. And inshallah we can move forward. May Allah indeed make us from the people of His book and His messenger. And may Allah guide the American people, black, white, and everybody in between, to Deen al-Haq, to Deen al-Islam. May Allah smash this false idol of white supremacy. May Allah smash this false idol of race-based thinking. And may Allah heal our hearts. May He bring consolation to the Floyd family and to all those who have lost loved ones through systems of oppression and brutality. وصلواته وسلامه على نبيه الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.